much to the video, and in today's video, we're going to be ranking every single team's NFL draft. This is post NFL draft. It was like 2 or 3 weeks ago was the NFL draft. I'm going to give you guys my post draft reactions. Gave every single team the grades as shown above. We have S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. S being the best, D being the worst. Giving all my grades for every single team. Now, what I will say is I'm not as much of a college football kind of guy, so I don't know as many of these players, and I don't have as much knowledge of these players, but I'm going to give you guys my grades based on what I know about these players, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I just don't know much about college football. I don't really watch college football. But I'll be giving you guys my grades nonetheless, so let's get straight into it. The first team we are ranking is the Arizona Cardinals. So they got the Ohio State O-tackle Paris Johnson Jr., which is actually a very, very smart pick because their O-line is terrible. They got an edge, BJ Ojulari, a corner, a wide receiver, an offensive guard, a quarterback, a linebacker, a cornerback, and a D tackle. I think they had actually a really, really good draft. They addressed the needs that they needed, especially the O-line help. I'm going to give them an A tier. I think they did a very, very good job based on the picks that they had. I thought going out and getting their positional needs was smart. Getting a quarterback was interesting, but I don't think it's necessarily terrible as well because, well, we all know Kyler. It's not insane, but I would give them an A tier for sure. Next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to give them a B tier. Now, what I will say is I understand, you went out and you were aggressive. You got Bijan Robinson, the best talent-wise player in this draft, no doubt. But realistically, he's a running back. He should not be picked in the top 10. Maybe he could go because of how good he actually is at 15. Around there, I'm fine with that. But where he was, it's a little bit of a reach. I get he has talent. I get all that. But in my opinion, you didn't need a reach for a guy like Bijan Robinson. I think it was a decent pick. And they, again, their running game is going to be ridiculous. You get the alligator, Tyler Algier. You got Bijan Robinson. Cordell might be still there. He might be even more in the receiving game. But I don't mind the draft. I also got an offensive guard, a defensive end, a cornerback, and a safety in the center. It definitely wasn't a bad draft for the Falcons. I just think that they could have done better with their picks. And I think a little bit of a high risk on Bijan Robinson, that high, even though he's going to be a stud. It's a running back. You shouldn't be taking him that high. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens. I think they had a really good draft. They got what they needed. Again, a wide receiver, Zay Flowers, going at number 22 overall. You got a linebacker, an edge, a corner, an O-tackle, and an O-guard. This was nothing crazy, but I think it's a solid B tier because I think they, again, addressed their needs. Yes, they didn't really have the big picks like they normally do, but I think it was a very solid draft from the Baltimore Ravens. Next up, we have the Buffalo Bills. I don't mind the draft, but I think it's going to be a C tier. It's a little below average. What I will say is I don't mind their draft. I like their picks of this end. You got a tight end first pick, 25th overall. Seems like a bit of a reach. I like Dawson Knox. I don't think you should be taking a tight end in that situation. You also got an offensive guard, a linebacker, a wide receiver, and another offensive guard, and a center back. Again, don't have a lot of huge intakes on these players. What I will say is I don't mind their draft. I just think that they could have done more with their picks. Next up, we have the Carolina Panthers. Solid draft. Very, very solid draft. They did go struggle in the second and third round. They did take some interesting picks, I will say. Bryce Young, obviously the first overall pick. Very, very smart. That's why I'm actually going to give them a B tier because you got the best quarterback in the draft. You went, you got who you wanted, so you got to give that a B tier. They didn't make that first pick stupid, so you got to give them a B tier for that. But their day 2 and day 3 picks were terrible. They were awful. They got a wide receiver, a edge, an offensive guard, and a defensive back. I think it's average. It's fine. It's decent. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears. I'm also just going to include what they did before the draft. What I mean by that is the DJ Moore trade, and I'm going to give them an S tier. I think they did incredible. They got DJ Moore. They also got a decent pick. They got an offensive tackle, Darnell Wright, who I think is, again, going to address those needs of protecting Justin Fields. They got a defensive tackle, a corner, a D tackle, a running back, a wide receiver, a linebacker, a center back, a D tackle, and a safety. They did very, very good, especially, again, we're going to talk about the pre-draft with the whole DJ Moore thing. I think it really helped their team out, and that's an easy S tier. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. I think it was fine. I'm going to give it a B tier. It was just decent. They got a Clemson edge, Myles Murphy at number 28 overall. They also got a corner, a safety, a wide receiver, a running back, a wide receiver, a puncher, and a quarterback. Again, they're addressing their needs, but I don't think it was an incredible draft by any means. Next up, we have the Cleveland Browns. This was a disappointing draft, and I know they didn't have a lot of options, but even the picks that they took was kind of crazy. I'm going to give this the first D tier of the video. What I will say is it wasn't a terrible draft. They didn't really have the greatest slots to take, but you got a wide receiver, a D tackle, an offensive tackle, an edge, a quarterback, a center back, and a cornerback, and a center. Don't think it's a bad draft, but you didn't draft till the third round, or end of the second round. I can't really tell. Early third round or end second round. It just wasn't a great pick in my opinion. Okay, next up we have is the Dallas Cowboys. I didn't like their draft. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't like it. I think it's a C tier. I didn't really like it. They got a defensive tackle, a tight end, a linebacker, an edge, an offensive tackle, a cornerback, a running back, and a wide receiver. It wasn't that good of a draft. I think that the first pick that they D-tackle, Mozzie Smith, was a reach. It definitely was a reach. I don't think that their second day two was not terrible. Day three was not terrible, but in my opinion, the day one kind of messed it up. I'm putting them in C tier. It wasn't the greatest draft for the Dallas Cowboys. Next up, the Denver Broncos. This is going to be another C tier. Wasn't really excited with what they did. Again, they didn't really have much going on because they did trade Russell Wilson. They got Russell Wilson, so they didn't have a lot of picks because they didn't draft until the second round. But you got a wide receiver who you really don't need, a linebacker, a corner, a safety, and a center. They didn't really feel like they really was reaching. They kind of just went for safe picks, and it wasn't that good of a draft for the Denver Broncos. Next up, we have the Detroit Lions D tier. Terrible, terrible, terrible. I mean, they saw Bijan Robinson go, and they were like, okay, at the 12th pick, why not? Let's get the second best running back there, Jahmyr Gibbs. Again, Jahmyr Gibbs is not a bad running back, but you should not be taking him at 12. And honestly, Bijan is so much better. They should not be separated by 4 picks. He should have been taken end of the first round, even early second, possibly. Terrible, terrible first round pick. They also got Jack Campbell, which wasn't the greatest pick either. They got a running back, a linebacker, a tight end, a D-back, a quarterback, a D-tackle, an O-guard, and a wide receiver. Terrible draft from the Lions. And I also had a lot of confidence. They also got rid of DeAndre Swift, so they have a lot of faith in this Jahmyr Gibbs kid. I don't really know much about him, but that's terrible. Next up, we have the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to put this in A tier. I think they actually had a really solid draft. Actually, I'm going to go B tier. I keep wanting to put them in A tier, but I have to put them in the B tier realistically because I think they could have taken better players. You got Luke Van Ness with the number 13 overall pick, which I think was a very, very smart pick, attacking the edge position. I like that. You also got a tight end, a wide receiver, a tight end, a D tackle, a quarterback, a wide receiver, a D tackle, a kicker, a cornerback, a running back, a safety, and a wide receiver. Not a terrible draft by any means. I think at their the day two, they kind of struggled, but I think that they brought it back up. I like their first round though, so I'm gonna give them a solid B tier. Next up, we have the Houston Texans. In my opinion, I'm sorry, I'm gonna give this an A tier. And honestly, it doesn't really again matter. But honestly, this is an S tier. I don't care. This is an S tier. I think this was an incredible move by the Texans. First of all, you get C.J. Stroud, but then you also trade up to get Will Anderson, the number 3 overall pick. So you're addressing the defense, you're addressing and getting a star quarterback for the future. And then you also get a center, a wide receiver, an edge, a linebacker, an offensive guard, a wide receiver, and a safety. Very, very good draft. I think honestly the first round, like everything else was kind of mid, but the first round was incredible. I really like this first round. Getting your franchise quarterback and also an absolute brute force on as an edge of Will Anderson. Next up, we have the Indianapolis Colts. I honestly think they had a solid draft. I'm going to give them A tier. Now, I will say that Anthony Richardson, we don't know much about him. I don't know how good he's going to be. But you also attack the positions, and honestly, taking a quarterback was a smart pick, and taking Anthony Richardson was a smart pick in that situation. Because I'm sorry, but Gardner Minshew is not that good of a quarterback. You also got a defensive back, a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, a defensive tackle, a cornerback, a safety, a tight end, a running back, an edge, and a cornerback, and an offensive tackle. I don't think it was a bad draft at all. I think it could have been better, but honestly, it was smart. They addressed their needs, and I like it. Next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was fine. I wouldn't say it was anything crazy. I'm gonna give this a C tier. It's a B. Because I do think they addressed some of their needs. Getting like an offensive tackle in the first round and Anton Harrison is gonna protect Trevor Lawrence, which I do very, very like. The day 2 and day 3 part of the draft was not that good, but it was fine. They also got an offensive tackle, a tight end, a running back, a linebacker, a defensive end, a linebacker, a safety, a wide receiver, a cornerback, a safety, an offensive guard, a D tackle, and a fullback. I don't mind their draft. I just think that they addressed their needs, but it wasn't anything crazy either. And they picked late, so it doesn't really matter. Next up, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a C tier. This very, very disappointed me. I think they should have gone a wide receiver a lot earlier. With your first round pick, you take a edge, which you took last year in George Karlaftis. You don't need an edge. This was kind of a dumb pick. I do like getting Rashee Rice at number 55. I do like that pick. But in my opinion, you should have picked a wide receiver way earlier, and they didn't, address their needs. They picked an edge, a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, a defensive back, a edge, a D tackle, and a cornerback. It wasn't the worst draft, but I think that first round pick really messed him up. I did not like that first round pick one bit. Next up, with the Las Vegas Raiders, I think it was just fine. I just think it was decent. Basically it was decent. I just don't think it was incredible of a draft. Tyree Wilson, not a bad player by any means, but I also think that they didn't really address the needs that they needed. They got an edge, a tight end, a D tackle, a wide receiver, a D back, a cornerback, a safety, a linebacker, and a D tackle. Not terrible, but I think that they could have done better with the draft, and I'm not too happy with that draft. And I'm going out of order, by the way, because I'm looking at this site, because I don't really know much of the players, I'm not going to lie. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. It's decent. I don't think it's great. I'm gonna say C tier. I don't know why they needed a wide receiver. I get it. Quentin Johnston's a stud, but you also had Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Joshua Palmer, which is an amazing slot wide receiver option. I didn't like the first round pick, in my opinion. The end of the draft, they started getting better, but in my opinion, this is not a good draft at all. I'm gonna give them a C tier, and I think it could have been a lot better. Next up, we have the Rams. They had a lot of picks. They got and they didn't have any first round picks, but it was fine. I didn't really care about their draft. It was kind of non-existent. I'm gonna give it C tier. It's kind of mediocre. They got an offensive guard, edge, a D tackle, a quarterback, a linebacker, an offensive tackle, a tight end, a wide receiver, a cornerback, an edge, a running back, a punter, a safety, and a D tackle. Nothing terrible, just nothing much special. It wasn't that insane. Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins. This draft might have been the worst. I don't care. This is a D tier. Yes, you did get a running back in Devon Achani, who I think could be decent, but getting Cam Smith, a cornerback from South Carolina, was not that good of a pick in my opinion. And they only had 4 picks in this draft. They got a cornerback, a running back, a tight end, and an offensive tackle. They could have done a lot more. I like them getting a running back because they do kind of need a running back. But I don't think it was a good draft at all. This was definitely a disappointing draft for the Miami Dolphins. I know they didn't have a lot of picks, but they also didn't get anyone that I really liked from those picks. The Vikings, I'm going to give them an A tier. They had a really, really good draft. I love them getting Jordan Addison in the first round. I think that was a really good pick because losing Adam Thielen, you need someone to replace him. That's perfect. You also got a defensive back, another defensive back, a D tackle, a quarterback, and a running back. I like the idea of the draft. I really like their first round pick, and that's going to propel me to put them in A tier for sure. Next up, we have the New England Patriots. It was a good draft. It actually was a very, very good draft. I'm giving them A tier. You got one of the best cornerbacks in the league, in college, in Christian Gonzalez at number 17. I love that pick. Also, you address your needs, getting a defensive end, a linebacker, a center. Now, what I would have liked to see them target more is those offensive threats, but I guess with Bill Belichick's thing, he didn't really want a wide receiver. I get it. It's fine. I just think they could have done a little more, and they maybe could have gone on a wide receiver. It's an A tier though, because it was a very, very solid draft. I think they addressed their needs, so I don't mind it. Next up, we have the New Orleans Saints. This was a bad draft map, and this is C tier. It's not terrible, but it didn't do much. They got a D tackle with their 29th overall pick. I think it's fine. I just think they could have targeted better positions. D tackle is not a position that they necessarily need. I think they could have targeted like a linebacker, but it's fine. They also got an edge, a running back, an offensive guard, a quarterback, a safety, and a wide receiver. Not a bad draft by any means, but nothing special. Next up, we have the New York Giants, and it was fine. It was decent. Nothing special. I do like their first round pick and Deontay Banks getting that cornerback stuff, but I'm gonna give them a B tier, kind of average if we're talking about the drafts. But I like them because they actually went for their positional needs. They got a cornerback, a center, a wide receiver, a running back, a defensive back, and a defensive tackle, safety. So I'll take that. I think that's a solid A minus. I think that's a solid B tier for the New York Giants. Next up, we have the New York Jets. They got, I don't mind their draft. I think it was just fine. I didn't really care for their first round pick, getting Will McDonald, the fourth, at number 15 overall, the edge. Again, not the position I would have targeted if I was a Jets GM. I think it was a decent draft, though. I'm going to give them a B tier because they had a good rest of the draft. I just think their first round pick was pretty terrible. They also got a center, an offensive tackle, a running back, a linebacker, a cornerback, and a tight end. So I think it was a decent draft, which is nothing special. Next are the Philadelphia Eagles. Easy S tier. Don't really need to talk about this too much. An incredible draft. You got Jalen Carter, number 9, which is an absolute steal. Nolan Smith, by the way, at the end of the draft, which is also an absolute steal. You target the positions that you need. You bolstered up that defensive line after you lost Javon Hargrave. An amazing draft from the Eagles. Amazing. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't really care for this draft. I think it was a B tier. It was kind of average. I do like their first round pick of getting an offensive tackle to help Kenny Pickett and the corner. I like their first round, but after that they got some weird picks: a D tackle, a tight end, an edge, and a quarterback, and an offensive tackle. Not positions I would necessarily target, but it definitely wasn't a bad draft for. Actually, I'm gonna retract my words. Now looking at it, it's an A tier. Definitely a solid draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Next up, we have the Niners, my team. They didn't do anything. This is probably just like a. It's just tough. I think it's just a C tier. They didn't really do much because they didn't have much opportunity to do anything. They drafted a safety, a kicker, a tight end, a cornerback, an edge, a linebacker, a tight end, a wide receiver, and a linebacker. Nothing crazy. It was just they didn't do much, in my opinion. They could have done a lot more, but they didn't really have the picks. They didn't pick till the third round. So yeah, that's my thing on that. Next up is the Seahawks, A tier. Very, very good draft. I love the Devon Witherspoon pick at number 5. And I also love the Jackson Smith-Njigba. That wide receiver core is going to be incredible in Seattle. And honestly, they had a really good draft. The first round might have been one of the best first rounds in the entire draft class, getting those 2 players. But they also got guys like the edge, running back, offensive guard, D tackle, DN, center, safety, and running back. I think it was a very, very solid draft. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was definitely a decent draft in my opinion. I think it's a B tier, kind of middle of the road, a little above average, but it's not enough to put them in A tier. They got a defensive tackle, an offensive guard, an edge, a linebacker, a tight end, a D-back, a wide receiver, and an edge, targeting the positions that they needed. Now, what I will say, maybe they could have done a little bit better based on positional needs. I don't think drafting a D tackle at number 19 overall was a smart pick. There's definitely more positions that they need on the offense and on the defense. So, and that reason why it's not that good, but it's definitely not a bad draft. I definitely see worse. Next up with the Tennessee Titans. This is hard for me to decide if this was a good draft or a bad draft. I think it's again just a B tier. My thing is Will Levis at 33 feels high. I don't think he is a good quarterback. I think he's the number 4 over quarterback, but I think he could have gone a lot later in the second round at least. They got an offensive tackle, a quarterback, a running back, a tight end, a no tackle, and a wide receiver. The offensive tackle makes sense. Very, very smart pick, Peter Skoronski. But in my opinion, the Will Levis pick didn't really make a lot of sense. And otherwise, their day 3 draft was also pretty bad. So I'm just going to put them in B tier. And the last team we are ranking is the Washington Commanders. They did. I'm gonna put them in C tier because I wish they did more. They got a corner with their number 16 overall pick. I know they could have done better with that pick. I don't like that first round pick. They definitely could have gotten more positional needs on the D line or even on the offensive line. I think that they could have definitely bolstered up those positions instead of attacking the cornerback. They also got a defensive back, a center, an offensive tackle, a edge, a running back, and a edge. So, in my opinion, not the greatest draft in my opinion, but it's not a D tier because I'm just a little disappointed with the draft. And that's the end of me ranking every single NFL draft from the best to the worst. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you guys don't get too mad about my predictions. I know I don't know much about college football, but I tried my best. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!